Have you ever wondered why the character of Fire Lord Sozin and the Fire Nation in Avatar the Last Airbender are very good villains? In today's video, we are going to explore why the live-action Netflix version of The Last Airbender does a good job to express just how much more hated Sozin and the Fire Nation can be with regards to what they do to the rest of the world in this franchise. The first thing that I want you all to do is comment down below if there was one thing in the live-action adaptation that you saw that made you realize just how much more you hated the Fire Nation and Sozin than before with the cartoon. I feel that the Netflix adaptation of Avatar does a very good job to give people more of a reason to really see why Sozin and his Fire Nation are so hated after everything that they did to the rest of the world during the 100-year war that they started. He and the Fire Nation are a path of destruction that completely outnumbers the rest of the nations altogether. I don't think anybody would disagree that the very opening of the live-action show with regards to the air nomad genocide is where almost 100% of why you hate him so much is depicted. Sozin really said, not only am I going to come up with a plan to deceive the nations on who he would attack first, but he would then deceive them well enough to where he could sneak attack into one of those nations to kill them all for good, Order 66 style. Even when the Earth Kingdom thought that they were going to be the one that was going to feel the attack from the Fire Nation first, they got tricked into thinking that it would be them. It just shows how deceptive and truly evil he in particular could have been to come up with something truly smart, but also as immoral as it gets when it comes to wanting to start a war. Obviously, we are not going to forget the genocide part because that is ultimately probably even worse. Eliminating an entire race of people simply because of the fact that they held the one who would be the most powerful of them all in order to help them win the war is just so sad. To be clear, obviously I know the actions themselves of everything I just said is truly terrible, but I also want to make it abundantly clear a lot of what I'm saying also comes from the fact that I feel like the live-action adaptation depicted it in a way to where you could hate the Fire Nation even more than if you were to say only hear about this event through dialogue. Basically what I'm trying to say is that the Netflix version taking the approach of showing and not telling honestly makes it more apparent that you could hate these people as much as you already did beforehand. And to that point, this is ultimately why I come to make a video like this to showcase these things. Let's also be totally real here. They knew what they were doing when they showed off all that stuff with regards to those little kids that Monkiatsu was trying to protect from Sozin. I think it's pretty safe to assume that even Sozin would not give any mercy to those kids, even though they didn't show on screen that imagery of them being killed. And again, I want to be clear about this. This video is almost in a way an accumulation of me talking about both the cartoon and the live action. I think both shows have done such a good job to show the level of how much you could go to hating on Sozin as a character. It's just that when you add in the things like this genocide depiction, it only furthers what everybody else can see so easily. There is so much lore and background to what the cartoon did, and here now with the live action to showcase all these points that I address. Even when Sozin passes it down to his own grandson Ozai, who resembles the exact same thing with regards to why you could hate Sozin so much, this comes from the fact that we see it in another instance in the live action show when we get the famous war meeting sequence in episode 6. Obviously, everybody here who knows Avatar knows this scene very well, where Zuko gets his punishment for speaking out of turn against a superior military officer. There are two factors to speak about with regards to the scene, but the first one I want to talk about is of everything that gets Zuko in trouble. He's very angry at the military officer who would dare propose a strategy plan that would involve sacrificing an entire division in their military. Ozai is furious about this, and he imposes the Agni Kai rule on both of them as they are now meant to duel each other in this disagreement. When the Agni Kai takes place, of course, Zuko is taken off guard by the fact that he doesn't actually fight the general, but he ends up fighting his father instead. This idea that Ozai felt disrespected in that manner and wanted to be shown teaching a lesson to Zuko, I feel like it's just a life lesson that definitely was passed down from grandfather to grandson in the case of Sozin. It's the very nature of these kinds of themes and ideas that get passed down from generation to generation that just goes to show that Sozin was truly such a massive factor in why 100 years of a war could have raged on for so long. It only took until Zuko for his bloodline generation to finally crack, and there would be a member in his family that would turn on the Fire Nation and truly see the despicable nature of what they did, especially with regards to how Ozai was going to carry it on by the time that Sozin's comet would come around and he planned to destroy the entire world using its power. I think that the crack also came in with Uncle Iroh as well with regards to this family, and since he is also the other grandson of Sozin, I just also think that it is important to note that I think Zuko was the beginning of that crack, and that crack would seep into Uncle Iroh as we get to see what he did in the rest of the story of Avatar the Last Airbender, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. When I also bring this conversation back around to the sacrifice of the 41st Division in the military plan that was suggested by the general, it is another thing to showcase that the themes of which Sozin was passing down didn't just come from what he was doing with his family, but also his nation from a military perspective. He didn't care how much it would take to defeat his enemies, so if that meant passing down all these military strategies for years and years in order for the Fire Nation to defeat their enemies, it would have to come from things like sacrificing the 41st Division. In the lore itself, it is established that his son, Azulon, carried out many of his policies with regards to Fire Nation imperialism and rivalry within his own family to make sure things were done right. This, of course, then carried on with Ozai, who was his son. There are almost real-world similarities and comparisons to this as well with regards to military regimes in previous wars. This very same thing would also happen with the Nazi regime under Hitler. When the war got closer to home in Germany and he found that he was losing so many soldiers, personnel, and military defenses, he would then do the insane thing of using his own citizens, from women to children, to help fight the war. There is a level of propaganda to it all as well, given that we learned so much about what the Fire Nation was about in the original cartoon in Book 3 with regards to how they propagandized the kids who were coming up in school and learning about what the Fire Nation was doing and how the rest of the world was at fault. Sozin was the one who started all this, as he passed it down through generations of his family, military, and his entire nation. I talked about this in my recent video, but this idea of what war and loss has done to people in this world is something that absolutely should be explored and talked about, and I feel like the live action show did a great job to give us those themes and explore it through the sequences that they gave us. It doesn't matter if it's that depiction of the genocide of the air nomads, the scene of Uncle Iroh and the Earth Kingdom soldier having a talk about their time in the war, what they lost, and how it affected them after through PTSD. All this stuff was created through the actions of Sozin and his Fire Nation at the time, and then spread through all over the four nations for over 100 years. We've barely even talked about how it affected those other nations as well with regards to the Water Tribes and Earth Kingdom. For over 100 years, those nations couldn't even barely talk to each other or see each other because there was this idea put forth that the Fire Nation was so vast and large that if they even tried, they probably would either be killed, oppressed, or captured. When the Fire Nation would get into more Earth Kingdom based places, they would impose massive tax laws and laws against bending that prohibited so much of the population from doing anything at all. This would also come to affect non-benders as well, considering both groups of people do rely on each other for things to be done in the world. I totally understand that some people watching this video might be a little caught off guard at the fact that I pretty much am only really mentioning the genocide as a main talking point with regards to this video topic, but I feel like something like that just holds a lot of weight when you know about the fact that the Netflix version went to actually showing you it. On top of that, I know for a lot of people who know Avatar well that this is not really something new and that they knew all this already, but I feel like it was just something fun to speak to with regards to really looking back at the Fire Nation and the character of Sozin as a whole and kind of going into a lore dive now that we have gotten the Netflix version and we were able to see a much more different exploration of his character, given that the very beginning of the show was something new that we never got before in the cartoon. On top of this, now that we know that we are getting Season 2 and Season 3, who's to say that we are not going to get more with this character that really shows us who he was? In the cartoon, we do have those flashbacks of him with Roku at the time when Roku was the Avatar. As they got older, Sozin really started to change, and I feel like the live-action adaptation has every chance to possibly expand upon how much he really changed and how he really became that hated villain that started the whole thing. So here's hoping that the next 2 seasons of the Netflix adaptation expand upon that, like they did with the expansion of so many other characters in this first season. I also don't feel like a lot of people have made videos like this on YouTube, and so it was something that I wanted to explore here on my channel with regards to this topic. I'm going to end it off there, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you all did enjoy this one. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning, let me know if there was any one thing from Season 1 of the Netflix adaptation that you found that you think added to why you think the Fire Nation and Sozin are so good of a villain and as hated of a villain as they are. Do you hope that the next 2 seasons give us more expansion on his character as well? Let me know down below. My fellow benders of all 4 nations, thank you so much for stopping by Uncle Iroh's tea shop, the Jasmine Dragon. I hope you all enjoyed his tea and his words of wisdom that came with it. If you did, be sure to give this video a like, and let's see if we can hit a goal of 200 likes for this one. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and turn on that notification bell to be updated for when I upload again in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. day, and I will see you all soon for more Avatar.